Hi, welcome to Last Week in Local for the last week in Local for this year, December 30th. We don't have a tremendous ton of news, but we're both free. We thought we would entertain you with our
Our BS.
and as a note, I wore a button-down collar just for the
you
event.
did.
I did, yeah, just to sort of close the year off with an exclamation point. So
Is that a Christmas gift?
No. I bought it, I think, earlier in the year for some wedding someplace. Maybe it was my nephew's wedding in New York. My kids didn't think that my polo was quite up to the standards of the wedding, so I actually went out and bought a new shirt, which I occasionally wear. And I saw it hanging. I thought I'll celebrate the end of this year by wearing a button-down shirt. Hopefully, everybody's still sitting in their chairs and can handle the rest of the show. I'm sure they can. Anyways, don't have a whole lot of news, but we thought we'd cover a few articles and then just sort of wrap up the year before we sign off. So I have two articles. One is an interesting article by ProPublica, where they go into great detail that and look at documents that show how Amazon chose speed over safety in building its delivery and last mile system. We've talked a lot about Amazon over the course of the year, their intrusion into and their growth, in fact, over the last several years, the development of their logistics network, all the way from factories in China to your door, with ships and planes and cargo containers and new warehouses, and ultimately their push into the last mile, which, as we noted last week, had tremendously damaging effect on FedEx's stock price. This article just goes into great detail in terms of the many ways that they've looked to speed up their deployment of their last mile network and some of the corners they cut along the way. Interesting article from ProPublica with a lot of research. The other is a tweet that was I first noticed it from Cyrus, and it's a product called Entity Explorer. Basically, it's got a very slick interface. You type in an entity like Local SEO or Barbara Oliver Jewelry, and it surfaces related entities in a very visual way. And then you can click on those related entities and see ties amongst those related entities back to the original entity. It's a very interesting sort of visual interface that might offer some keyword research. If nothing else, it's really attractively done way of looking at the relationship between entities. And that's what I have for new news this week. Mary, what do you have?
Okay, so for new news, I noticed this morning that California has a new privacy law that's going to affect the internet and retailers. And I think that privacy is one of those things that's going to be a much, much bigger deal going into 2020. Especially with elections coming up. So I thought that was a pretty interesting article.
Yeah, any company, I think the rules are any company that has more than $25 million in sales in California or information on more than 50,000 individuals, I think, in California, is required to comply with the law. The law is mostly around a consumer's ability to understand how they're being tracked and what information you're keeping on them, the ability for that consumer to remove that information. What the problem with the law was that they haven't clarified what it really means. I mean, obviously the purpose of the law is to sort of corral in Google and Facebook sort of infinite amount of information, but they haven't made clear yet what compliance is. So it's a law that's interesting and has an impact on a lot of SaaS companies. I'm sure you've noticed in your inbox all of the new updated privacy policies,
Right.
which seem to be an attempt to be in compliance with that. But it's still not clear what the law in practice means or how to best comply with it. So,
Yeah. And what I read was basically saying that these big companies are going to have to spend more time educating the consumers as to the fact that there are privacy laws and what they are, how they're handling their different. And then podcasts have kind of exploded this year. We even have a podcast at Local U now, and Nikki Moser did
Even,
a.
hold it, we were at the front edge of that wave. We've been doing this every year since 2016, I think.
It's hard to remember.
Long time. So we were at the
But-
front of the wave, not at the top of it. Just
Not at the top.
just for historical
Well,
reference.
I don't think the top of the wave has even approached. We haven't even approached the top of the wave
Well,
yet.
that could be.
But Nikki Moser did a nice Whiteboard Friday where she gives you tips about how to do your podcasts and how important transcripts are in the world of podcasts.
Yeah, interestingly, that's something that hasn't changed. That Moz has always done, that I always liked. You know, we've obviously always done it. We use SpeechPad, which is an automated transcription service. Sometimes when I mumble, it doesn't always get me, but for the most part, it does a pretty good job of transcribing our content.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to get a fairly good transcription, how easy and cheap it is.
Yeah.
So if you're doing podcasts, definitely take a look at this Whiteboard Friday. It's worthwhile. And then, kind of moving more into the what were the big trends in local last year. There's a really good article at Search Engine Land with SEO Year in Review, and it talks about all the big deals, and nearly all of them relate to local search, such as zero-click searches, BERT, the spam that we have to deal with in local. There's an opening for you, Mike.
So from my point of view, there were sort of several very large trends that I found interesting during the year, and obviously I reported on extensively. One is the ongoing realignment of retail and retail logistics, which I think is integral. To a large extent, Amazon's at the center of that sort of realignment. It's one way or another, although we've reported throughout the year that many malls and the closings of chains had to do with the fact that retail has been so dramatically overbuilt in this country that retail has become the playground of private equity and leverage and fee extraction, leaving many of these retailers laden with debt. But it's also been a function of sort of the changing of the retail landscape. Right at the beginning of the year, we reported on the increase of experience-driven retailers like pet grooming and massage, and the concurrent decrease in sort of traditional bricks and mortar retailers, particularly in general goods, shoes, and those types of things. So I think, we will see this realignment ongoing due to all these factors, over leverage, over building, and that's going to affect the malls, and these malls are either going to realign themselves in terms of into places where experiences take place, which is something even Walmart's talking about, or they will ultimately become irrelevant. I think in the end, we will see that general commodity goods, joy and kitchen goods and those types of things will largely go through Amazon and Walmart in the end. And the rest will either be niche distributions or experiences. So that was one big trend that I saw. The other revolve around, one trend that I noted at the beginning of the year that I thought would happen, which was that Google would embrace consumer to business communications more effectively throughout the year, either by, they had discontinued SMS at the beginning of the year. They created a sort of moderate relationship with Podium for at least large clients to continue SMS later in the year. Just last week, they created the SMS or the ability to communicate via their app only from businesses to consumers, but they haven't really pushed that into any direction that made any sense or to expand. In fact, it's still a bucket of crap and not working very well. For example, the business app on your phone where you need to do the communication with your customer doesn't work if you have more than a couple locations anymore in your thing. They totally screwed that up a couple months ago and haven't fixed it. So it's not clear what Google is doing with B2C communications. I mean, I stand by the early year sort of prediction that Google would do something with it. I just don't know if it's, obviously it wasn't in 2019. I don't know if it'll be in 2020. The other two big things that I thought were interesting, and they relate. One was Google's increased focus on images and image search and image answers as a part of local. We saw multiple occurrences of Google using their much improved image AI to essentially obviate the need for things like title tags, or maybe it's in response to the fact that nobody was using image tags. Google figured out how to classify and categorize images in relation to entities and local, and it showed up in thumbnails for mobile organic results. It showed up in images changing in local queries based on the query phrase, and it showed up in the new search by photos or search by images carousel that's now available, where again all these images. So to me, that's a really big trend, which demonstrates the power of machine learning, particularly around images and how it relates to local. And the other was a similar machine learning driven process, their ability now to leverage reviews, not just for snippets, not just for summaries of what's going on in the local, but they rolled out the places labels, which summarize the whole review corpus, although not very effectively yet. They also started surfacing reviews in answer to Google Q&A, and just several weeks ago, we noted that Google was using reviews, posts, and product posts and products to sort of answer product and service long-tail queries directly in the knowledge graph, which to me, so they used AI in both reviews and images to enhance the user experience, which I think is driving, if I read the tea leaves correctly, and again, whether it'll happen this year or next, Google's continued push into products and product sales in the local space, where they've long been behind Amazon in product search, but they're building out a number of tools which are enhancing product search locally, both in terms of the GMB, new feeds from POS, from point of sale systems, bringing more products directly into that, and then surfacing them, like I said, in this new way with this query carousel. So those seem to me the big trends that we need to keep an eye on. Images, reviews, AI, use of AI to surface better answers to queries, keeping people on Google, but also, one assumes, moving them further into the local product purchase funnel.
Right. And nearly all those things you mentioned seem to be ways that Google is training the knowledge graph to be bigger, badder, better, with topical layers, with location layers, with specific businesses and everything that's attached to them. The knowledge graph has been the big game changer in search and local search in particular, and being able to feed Google images and reviews in a way that they can understand them, I think is really helpful to local businesses, because Google will attach those to their knowledge graph.
Yeah. Just a note on that is just that it's interesting because the knowledge graph essentially rolled out in, I think, 2011, the beginning of this decade. It was one of the earliest uses of local. Local was sort of the canary in the coal mine of the knowledge graph, and the knowledge graph has expanded exponentially over the last 10 years with more and more relationships, entities, and answers, and really is largely going to define search for at least the next 3 or 4 or 5 years until, and even after, once voice becomes more common or more used, I think entity answers will be the types of answers you get out of a voice search engine.
Agreed. And then one of the things that that I noted, and I put it in here just under with a link to the local search forum, but um, I haven't seen any articles specifically about it. But I think the world of local SEO has changed quite a bit in 2019, and a lot of the bigger players have had some important changes. Moz, I'm still wondering kind of what happened with Moz Local and why they're teaming up with Uberall. I don't see a clear picture there of why that was happening.
Well, I think you're
But
seeing
well,
one of the areas there. I think you're seeing a consolidation of the listing management space for a number of reasons. One is, so you're seeing that listing management essentially has rolled up and become dominated by Uberall and Yext, and I think that's normal in an industry. But I think the other side of that is what you and I have talked about a lot, which is that listing management, at least for small businesses, has become much less critical to their local SEO success. And I think that the fact that fixing listings, having clean listings at some directory, who knows where, is no longer relevant because of the knowledge graph and the stability of the knowledge graph and Google's ability to to include information in the knowledge graph that isn't as dependent as it used to be 10 years ago on having clean listings everywhere. So I think you're seeing two trends converging there, and I think Moz, whether through lack of investment or lack of interest, did not, even though they were one of the first in the marketplace, didn't really leverage that position and lost out in the battle to Yext.
And Yext was kind of one of the things I also wanted to talk about. We've been debating their value for years and years. And I noticed this morning that they're still claiming in ads that, you can control your business information everywhere. And, that's still not true.
So it's not true on multiple levels, but it's not. But what's interesting about it, from my point of view, is this is a cash cow for them, and they are using it to try to pivot into sort of digital location management system, which is a little
Right.
more abstract and perhaps needed more by large multi-location chains. Although even there, a well-run website with well-run canonical data probably could live without Yext and the expense of Yext. But Yext is using that cash from local listings, which I see as sort of this. All industries go through sort of an S-shaped growth where let me get this right here. S shapes, it peaks, and then often it declines. And I think listing management is in that point where it's going to be declining due to lack of utility. And I think Yext is maximizing their income from it to try to move into this broader location management system area, whatever that might mean. In the case of Yext, who knows what it means, right?
Yeah. And I think that the big issue with Yext has always been they do not have a relationship with the major data providers, even though there's really only one major data provider left.
Well, there are two, actually. I think Foursquare, one of the things that has changed and become obvious to me over the last 2 years maybe, is that Foursquare has become a major alternative data provider to InfoUSA. Axiom is out of business. Localese is really not a player. But Foursquare feeds Apple, they feed Uber, they feed Lyft. And so their role in the ecosystem is as a reasonable alternative is pretty well solidified by the all but Google local needs, and that largely revolves around transportation, navigation, sort of things that are going on in the local space. So Foursquare has succeeded in that pivot over these last 10 years from a end user product to a data product, and has succeeded in becoming a viable alternative data source to either the Google Maps API, which they now charge for, or other competitive sources. So I think there are two, but their role has changed, right? And Yext no longer services, to the extent that they feed data to Foursquare, that's valuable. To the extent they feed it to the Yellow Pages, it's not.
Does Uberall feed to Foursquare or Infogroup?
I would imagine they do. I haven't even looked anymore because it's like almost irrelevant. I mean, in the sense, I did a small, I think I told you this, I think I discussed this research a little bit. Maybe in the spring I'll share it publicly. But I did this research where there was a location that had a massive amount of location confusion because they were the third same business at that location in about 5 years. We didn't do any primary seeding of their information anyplace. InfoUSA managed to pick it up through however they do, Yellow Pages maybe, I'm not sure. But it had no impact on the rank. When I finally did clean it up after a year and a half of working with the business, it had no impact on the rank. We went and we cleaned it up everywhere. We got it listed everywhere, and it had zero impact on the rank. So it's like the need for citation cleanliness, or whatever you want to call it, that sort of neurotic need to make sure that it's the same everywhere, is only important insofar as high-use apps like Uber, like Lyft, like Yelp, like Apple are using the data. If they're not, then it's irrelevant. So what that means is everything from the Yellow Pages down has largely become irrelevant because they no longer have much traffic. You and I have talked a little bit about the importance of vertical directories. Maybe really should fill in that role, but it's not clear that to some extent.
Yeah. So, the point of all this is the world of citations has really changed extremely over the past 5 years.
Correct.
And in my opinion, anybody who's still selling monthly citation building packages is probably not spending their clients' money wisely.
I would agree with you on that one. From the agency point of view, I think that if you're mostly concerned with lead generation and not, then you have to look at citation packages and their role in your suite of tools.
Right.
And I think you should test it. Is one of the things Joy did, though. Joy Hawkins did it. When she set up a new agency, she tested whether claiming and verifying citations made any difference in rank. She came to the conclusion it didn't. Same conclusion I came to. We came to it independently, and she, doesn't do cleanup as a natural part of, or as an organic part of her local campaigns anymore.
And it used to be one of the first things we would look at.
Right. Well, in the late 2009, 2010, 11, it did have an impact, an immediate and clear impact on visibility and rank. So it had a reason for being done. Anymore, it doesn't.
And then, as part of these changes in the local search world, Bright Local and Whitespark have continued to evolve their tools and services. Bright Local's dashboard keeps becoming more comprehensive. Places Scout's dashboard keeps becoming more comprehensive. And I think that, the people who do local SEO are looking for that dream dashboard that can do everything for them. I'm not sure that anyone will really ever be able to achieve that, but there have been a lot of changes that are worth looking at in the big local tools. And then also as news, SEM Rush jumped into local with both feet. They're having a lot of local blog posts now, a lot of local guests. Local Marketing Institute has become a free platform just recently. And then, personally to Mike and I, the biggest news is that Local U was acquired by Sterling Sky, and that GatherUp has been acquired by a marketing behemoth.
And a related question to that, Mary, is can either one of us be good employees?
For very short periods of time.
Okay, I have a half hour. We have trouble following directions. We're really good at giving them. We have trouble following them, and so we'll see, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So for you and I, the new year starts on a new foot. In fact, maybe that's why I'm wearing my new shirt. And I actually have new sneakers on. I can't show them to you in this limited view of reality, but I actually have new sneakers too. Took me 7 months. I'm the kind of guy that buys the same shirts, the same pants, the same socks, the same sneakers, time and again, because I don't like to have to think about it in the morning. I think I've told you this. Anyways, my favorite sneaker company went out, discontinued the model that I was using, and it took me 6 months, and I had to go into a real sneaker store to learn the story. I was not able to learn it. And there are no sneaker stores in Olean anymore, part of this large retail picture, right? And I had to go, when I was in Boulder a couple months ago, I learned that there are two kinds of running sneakers. Basic running sneakers for people with normal feet, and then running sneakers, which are called support sneakers, for people who pronate. And that every line of sneakers has a version of that designed for people who pronate, which I never knew before. And I only learned it by going into a great sneakers shop, which I bought a pair of sneakers from them. And now I have a new model I can order safely through 2020. So all is good in the world. I don't think I'm going to order more button-down shirts, though. Just saying. So my prediction for 2020 is, even though I have new sneakers, I won't be dressing any better.
And of course, before we go, we want to mention that there's an advanced local U concentrated on Google and Google My Business.
Called the Google My Business Masterclass.
Right. And it's going to be in Atlanta on March 25th.
And it's the first time in Atlanta for us, so we're hoping that you folks that are listening from Atlanta can find your way to buy a ticket. Come see us. We'd love to see you. When you're there, be sure to reach out to us and say hi. So with that, I'll say goodbye to you, Mara, and goodbye to 2019. May 2020 be less aggravating.
Really. We'll see you next week.
All right,
next year.
Yep. Bye.